Hey everybody, what's up? JB here from Soccer Dad Pod. We got another episode to talk about, of all things, soccer. Imagine that. That's what we're here for. I do not have either one of my carpool co-hosts with me today because, again, as you all know, they've got real day jobs. So, feel sorry for them at your own discretion. Text them, whatever. Say, time for a change, because they both would love a change. They'd come hang out with me all day. But alas, it's myself and guest today. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about a number of topics that many of you, on the record, off the record, sitting in the bleachers, standing in line, trying to get a little pop there at Soccer Park and other locations. You just are all trying to figure it out. So I'm going to ask the questions that you've been asking me because I don't know anything. I'm a vessel. We are a vessel here at Soccer Dad Pod to transfer information, stories, insights. So hopefully we do that for you today. Before we bring our guest on, just real quick, I want to remind you guys, we do have a new friend of the show, Flywheel Systems. I've told you before, we're talking about a little bitty device that they bring to you. It's all free for them to install. If you got Wi-Fi, you got people in your building, in your office, at your complex, at your training facility, at your concert venue, whatever you have. If there are people with their cell phones and they're on their phone scrolling, which I'm sure that doesn't happen anywhere, right? Flywheel.systems, go there, check it out. Free evaluation, take a look at the site, and if it works, your tenants, your employees, your patrons will have better Wi-Fi, clean up your line a little bit, and guess what? You get paid. So I saved the best for last. You do nothing, you pay nothing, and you get paid. Flywheel.systems, check it out. Real quick recap too. As you guys know, I always like to go back in time to remind you of what you missed. If you have missed and you're jumping in on this episode, Nate Shapiro was our previous guest. Nate was a 4-year SLU Billiken. Came from the Northeast. He was a Yukon kid up in that neck of the woods. And funny story, he tells it in the episode, that whenever he did get the offer to go to SLU, didn't come from a soccer family, and as such, he had to pull out a map, a literal map, to show them where Missouri was in reference to America. So that's where we started, but his story is really amazing. If you're a player wondering what's next and you want to go play at the next level, you want to play at the highest level, his story is equal parts inspiring, educational, because what you think would be this fairy tale story of glory minutes and games and game-winning saves, because he was a keeper, and all of that, this is not going to bust your bubble on the story. He didn't get those minutes, not at all, not even close. But we'll go down in history. SLU is one of the most valuable individuals to the program. We heard from Coach Kalish and Stoll, et cetera, outside of our conversation with Nate, and then he told it from his perspective. So go check it out. Just a really great story about pathway and being aware of who you are, what kind of a player you are, and what is really important about being on teams like that. So Nate Shapiro, previous episode, go check it out. Like, review, follow, share, all free. And I've said it before, it gets a little annoying. We have low self-confidence, so when you do that, that boosts us up a little bit. And there we go. Without further ado, you've read your dash. You know who we have coming on here. We are going to be talking about U.S. youth soccer with newly anointed, I'm imagining maybe a round table scene, Miss Tina Rincon for U.S. youth soccer. Tina, thanks for joining.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to speak a little bit about youth soccer and what's happening in the landscape today.
Let's just start right there, right out of the gate. How are things going? I'm sure not a lot going on. You're just kind of chilling, going around, watching some youth soccer. Parents sharing their bevies on the sideline. What's going on at U.S. Soccer these days?
Yeah, everyone's pretty chill. There's been no big announcements coming out this week or anything like that. It's business as usual. No, I think it's awesome. been, I got, like you kind of said, I got elected about a year ago now to be chair of USU Soccer, and it has been a crazy ride, but it's been really awesome. And I think right now we're at the point where we are really starting to make progress, and we're really starting to see things come together and a lot of the hard work put in. I know we're going to jump in a little bit to alphabet soup and everything like that, but as far as USU Soccer goes and where we are, we're really excited about where we're sitting and what the future holds for us.
Well, let's do this. As one of my favorite little sayings here in these episodes, people know what I'm going to say. I'd like to put a little pin in the map so that we get a better understanding of the guest, your background, maybe kind of an origin as it relates primarily to the game. If you don't mind, just give us a quick rundown, a little bio, hometown, kind of club life up through your college days, your relationship to the game at an early age. What did that look like?
Yeah, for sure. So I started playing soccer when I was about, 8 years old, very late by today's standards. I probably wouldn't even make an academy team
like
at this point.
7 years late in today's standards, right?
That's fine. No, but I grew up in Dallas, in North Texas, played for Sting back when Sting was only, when everybody was only 10 teams in their club. And then went on to go to nationals a couple times, played in college, played at Texas Tech. After college, I graduated, got my master's. I tried my hand at coaching college for a little bit, but then I realized, that it's not really where I wanted to be in. So I came back and did just CPA, accounting, everything like that. Continued to play on the weekend and indoor soccer and everything. And a couple years ago, just really said, hey, I want to continue to pursue my passion, which is soccer. Like many of us, our biggest passion is soccer. And so found a way to combine that expertise of accounting and finance with soccer. And so that's when I joined the board of USU Soccer in 2021, and then have just kind of navigated through it to where I am today as chair of USU Soccer, and actually sit on the US Soccer board as well.
So, okay, here's where I would like to start. Because when people hear U.S. Youth Soccer, I guarantee that if we polled 10 individuals that have kids in soccer, they have no idea what the organization actually is, who they oversee, etc. So let's start there. U.S. Youth Soccer, as an organization, what leagues or formats or kind of institutions, so to speak, do you guys represent, manage, and coordinate?
Yeah, for sure. So USU Soccer, we have about 2.6 million players nationwide. So in St. Louis, think about Missouri Youth Soccer. So they are a member of USU Soccer. Now, Missouri Youth Soccer probably runs a lot of the recreation leagues and everything up there. And so I would say probably out of our 2.6 million players, probably 2 million of them are, 2 to 2.2 million are rec players and really play in that space. Then we have our competitive travel space, and that's where we sit with National League, E64, which we're phasing out, a lot of those types leagues. And then when you're playing on your state side, you have State Cup, President's Cup leading up into our National Championship Series, which if you've been to Orlando in July in the past couple of years, you would have been playing for our tournament.
Okay, so let's go through a little bit of the compare and contrast to, maybe at a super high level, because some of the other organizations that are kind of operating in the same way as you guys would be U.S. Club Soccer, which is a separate entity. And help me out, because I'll be honest, I don't know this. I don't know the actual logistics. MLS Next, that league as well. I think they are independent of that. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
But talk a little bit about the differences between your organization, U.S. Club Soccer, MLS Next, and what leagues kind of fall below those.
Absolutely, yeah. So when you're looking across the landscape, the other big, we kind of have the big three that's part of the youth council and the youth organizations. And so you have US Club, which is mostly a registration platform. They have some of their own leagues. They partner with ECNL. So on the girls' side, obviously ECNL is one of the highest, so the highest leagues and everything. And then ECNL RL That's going down into a couple different levels. On the boys side, you have MLS Next, which I know your son's part of, and then they are now rolling into the MLS Next 2 side and everything like that. So I know everyone's probably seen that pyramid that's gone out over the past couple of weeks to try to see where we all land. But if you're looking at it, I would say USU soccer lands probably, you have MLS Next, GA, ECNL at the top, and then we try to take up a lot of that middle area. Now, this depends a lot by state and by location because let's say like in the Midwest, there might not be as much U.S. club presence. And so USYS might have some of the more, the stronger teams in those areas. And state by state, there's a lot of different things that are happening there too, which is probably why as a soccer mom or dad, it is very confusing to know where your kid should play.
So let's get into the juicy subject. I'm going to hit this early so that you put some people at ease here. Let's talk about it. Birth year, ages. Yep. There's confusion as far as what it's going to apply to, who it's going to apply to. As I just mentioned, and as you were just referencing, we've got these other organizations and their leagues and their registration leagues underneath it. Take a second and give us the 101 on birth year versus school year. Where does US youth soccer stand on this, and how does it apply to any of the other leagues, if at all?
Yep. No, for sure. So U.S. soccer, let's start with kind of how it came to be and why we're making the change to begin with. So U.S. soccer over the past 2 years has done a pretty in-depth ecosystem review to look at all different attributes of the ecosystem and the landscape and how we can fix that and kind of make that better. And so one of the things that came up through these conversations was, hey, why are we playing birth year? That makes sense a lot for development, for international play. But at the end of the day, of the 3 million, 4 million players that play soccer in the United States, the vast majority of them are recreation, and the vast majority of them want to play soccer with their friends. There's data out there that says, at age 14 on a girl's side, participation drops because they're not playing with their friends anymore, and they're looking at it from a social aspect. So really started to have the conversation around, hey, how do we make sure that we're getting more people to play the game and to play the game and have fun? And so that's where the conversation started to come to go back to school year. When I played, we were school year, and then we moved to birth year, and now we're just kind of going back to where we were in 2017, 2018. And so actually just announced this week, USYS, AYSO, and US Club, and then Byway ECNL, we will be rostering all of our national events, all of our programming at the school year rostering formation, which will basically start August 1st and then end July 31st. And so that really is just taking us back in time to where we were almost, 8 years ago. And so I've heard that MLS Next and GA are not going to be making that change. I think there's still, time to make those decisions. But again, they're more pre-professional. They're more in line with the international route and stuff like that. Our ODP program will be staying birth year because again, that's how the national teams and are ranked and everything from that perspective. But as far as competition wise, AYSO, US Club, USYS, all of our events will be based on that school year. This is a decision that member organizations can make themselves. So let's say a Missouri Youth Soccer, if they want to stay birth year, they can. If they want to use September 1st through August 31st, they can. Now, I don't think a lot of our state associations will do that because the national organizations are using school year August through July, but there is that flexibility just because some state associations and local organizations tend to know what works better for their players. One of the most important things when it came to this decision was making sure that USYS and US Club were aligned in the decision and AYSO, because we didn't want it to be something that, hey, I have a player that's a dual registered and plays on a USYS team and they play in US Club as well. And they're on this team for here and this team for here and stuff like that. We didn't want to make it be something that was a competitive advantage one way and the other way. So early on, when the conversation started, the three organizations decided that we were going to make a change and we were going to make it together. So for us, that was a really big win.
So let me kind of throw a little wrench in the machine here, because I kind of looking at the landscape, and if I zoom out, St. Louis. Well, let me start here. In our backyard, we're privileged. We're lucky. We've got a multitude, probably more than most clubs that do perform at high levels, all the way from MLS Next Academies, all the way down through CYC Rec, etc. But the other part of the component, and this is where I want to lean into, is our high school scene thrives. We have legendary schools, on both the boys and the girls side. In the state of Missouri, the state championship runs land in St. Louis more times than not. And so what I'm trying to wrap my head around is how you guys view this, because one of the biggest reasons most people really want and or lean into school year as opposed to birth year is the relationship to high school soccer. However, high school soccer across the country, not all regions play just in the fall, or summer, winter time. Some and then there are many that are springtime leagues. So how is this helping create continuity within these leagues and the competitions, et cetera, that do start to spread out beyond their local, regional to national events, when you still are going to have kind of the push and pull between clubs and schools, and 3 different seasons of leagues? How do you guys view that? Is that even an issue that you consider?
Yeah, so I do want to be clear that changing it to school year is not changing when games are played or anything like that. It is just rostering. It is really when you're the boundaries of your roster, which that's a good point, because a lot of people, when we first started talking about it, they were like, oh, is it going to be a 13-year season at first? Like, what are we doing? Are we changing it? And so it relates more to rostering and where you fit in there. So while there's not necessarily a relation to when high school season is played, because the national programming and leagues and stuff, the competition isn't going to change. But the focus is really more so a couple things. Right now you have, a 15-year-old boy that was born in January playing against a 15-year-old boy that was born in December. There's very big changes, maturity level, strength, everything like that can happen. And so trying to back away from some of that. But again, it really goes back to when we're looking at why people want to play soccer. A lot of people want to play soccer for the social aspect, to have fun and to be around their community. And when you're doing that and you're saying, hey, half the team, or maybe some of this team is in one grade, the other team is in another grade, we're seeing people drop off. And historically, we saw people drop off because they weren't playing with their friends anymore. And so that is really the biggest reason behind it, is to make sure that the social aspect was still there, so that hopefully, especially if we're not rolling it out this year, we're rolling it out next year, 26, 27. And I don't know if there's this little tournament coming to town. And so trying to see there and capitalize on some of that stuff as well, of, hey, this 3rd grader wants to go out and play soccer. He wants to go play with his friends. Now he can go play with his friends.
So let me ask a question going back to the other organizations, U.S. Club Soccer in particular. Are you aware of, or do you know, will they be implementing a similar change in age group to the school year as opposed to the calendar year?
Yep, U.S. Club is doing the same thing, and so is AYSO.
Okay, so the only ones that are on the outside looking in from this structure is really MLS Next, which would include the GA and MLS Next 2 at this point. And then I believe the National League is rolling into the MLS Next funnel. Is that correct?
Our National League is part of USYS.
Okay. Again, too many alphabets. I'll figure that one out later. So let me ask you more of a theoretical question then, because obviously, I'm going to go to the top of the pile. We look at our national team. We look at really two different issues that are occurring for significantly different reasons. Number one, the U.S. women, while are still highly rated, obviously globally as one of the top 3, 4, 5 teams, right? The reality is the rest of the world is catching up, and that's good on all those other nations for increasing access for girls, women, et cetera, to play at the higher levels. We were first to market in that. Odd, I know, but we were, and that resulted in a lot of wins. On the other side, we have the men's team, which on paper has been debated as the most, quote, talented ever. All these products coming up through our academies and then going to Europe, et cetera, and yet we're not winning. And I'm laying this out, and I'm prefacing the question with those two kind of situations that we're watching in real time. And then I look at the compare and contrast between other nations and how they're structured, whether it's the FA in England, the La Liga system in Spain, et cetera. They are all clear-cut vertical integrations between the top national team down through the professional leagues, funneling all the way down to their academy, club, and rec. They all wear the same patch. We don't. We have, obviously organizations like yours and U.S. Club Soccer and MLS Next. And then within those, we've got all these other leagues that, to a degree, they'll claim some vertical organization, but we all know it's not. It's more horizontal, depending on region. Yeah. How do you view that? Would you agree with that kind of, simplistic analysis? And what does it mean to you when you think about the landscape in those terms?
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people say is like, hey, Spain does it this way, and that's how we should model it. And to some extent, it's right. I think Spain is a much different. Any European country is much smaller than the United States, right? Some of those countries are as big as just one state and stuff. So you battle that, but I think holistically, there is agreement across a lot of the youth soccer organizations that there does need to be a simpler way and a better landscape and smoother ecosystem, and that is something that we are working at and right now trying to figure out. At USU Soccer specifically, we are trying to find ways to work more with US Soccer to understand, and we're diving into just kind of, hey, what do our states do and what does the national office do, and how can we be more efficient there, and how can we create, maybe there's standardization, maybe there's different metrics that you have to do to qualify for this, and again, when we talk about things like this, we're talking about a very small portion of who plays soccer. Again, when I talk about our 2.6 million members, I'm talking about 400,000 perhaps of our total membership. US Club has about 700,000, 800,000 members. That's the portion that's playing this level of soccer. And then the portion that's actually going to play on the national team and international is even smaller than that. And so we try to check ourselves a little bit and say, okay, while that's really important, we're responsible for all of youth soccer. Now, one thing that's coming out that US Soccer announced is the US Way. And so this is really their way of looking at, hey, how do we get kind of sporting to go the same all throughout? And so USU Soccer, US Club, we are looking for ways to work together to support US Soccer in that. And so that's something that'll be coming out over the next couple months and years as well, is like, hey, we believe that this is the definition of US Soccer, and that's what the US Soccer Sporting Department will do. And then how does that go into USU Soccer ODP system, US Clubs ID2 system? How does that all work together? Those are conversations that are happening to figure out, are there things that we can collaborate on to create a better pathway, so that we do have more success at the utmost, at the highest level. I don't think anyone's naive to say that we know that we're not having the success at times that we want, but by having, hey, this is the definition of what we think US Soccer should look like, and this is how USU Soccer, US Club, MLS fit into that, is a really helpful conversation to get us all on the same page.
So let me really poke the bear here, and let's take take a second. Well, I want to really. I wasn't going to go this route, but then I kind of reading your bio and really your professional background as a CPA, as a CFO. I want to talk about pay to play. Let's talk about numbers. Because you just pointed out that, of the 2.2 to 2.5 or whatever the number is that's within the organization, you have roughly 400,000 that are playing at, quote, a competitive level, or, maybe, are the kids that are, I don't know, looking at upward mobility as opposed to the rest that are just looking at it as fun and rec. The other 2 million, that are not part of that 400,000 on the competitive side, they too are seeing trend lines going up and to the right when it comes to total expenses, overhead, team fees, you name it. It's all going up. And part of it is, and we don't need to get in the weeds as to, greed or any, these businesses and these leagues and these clubs. But I just want to I want to get your opinion or maybe your take as to what you view U.S. youth soccer, your organization. What is your role or your responsibility when it comes to pay to play and being aware of or attempting to implement policies or changes or things that might ease that burden? Because again, the vast majority are rec players. And I would have to assume probably a fairly large percentage of them are not living in the, the 4,000 square foot burbs. Yep. So what's your organization's role when it comes to the money?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think there's a couple different routes to go down. At the end of the day, what we do at USYS level is definitely more the national championship and kind of some of those bigger events. But I will say this, USYS firmly believes that something like ODP, the players that have to pay to go to the next level aren't always the best players. And we need to find a way for ODP to be free. Don't quote me on that. Don't say, hey, but that is something that we truly are passionate about, because you might have a player that doesn't have the resources to go to this, and they could be a great player. And we want to make sure that every player has the opportunity to move up if they feel like that. And so we're constantly trying to find ways of how do we make programs like that more affordable for families. And that's something that we can control, right? Is that, hey, do we get a sponsorship? We've worked to see if there's ways to get ITG grants and stuff from US Soccer to really fund some of that stuff, because we do believe that, hey, just because I live in a 4,000 square foot house in the burbs doesn't mean I'm the best player, and doesn't mean that I should be on the national team or being able to go to all of these events. Now, at the same, so that's kind of like our top level, how we see it and what we think we can do to help that situation. My vice president, vice chair, he's very passionate about this. And when he came on board, he keeps telling me that is one thing that I really want to make happen, Tina. We need to make it happen so that we can get more players. He actually has a history of like refugees and stuff like that. And he's like, those are the players that we need to be giving opportunities to. Now, when we look at more of the recreation players and stuff like that, that's really where there is a huge opportunity. Doing things like soccer in school, grassroots programming, after school programming. How do we get players and kids that wouldn't normally be exposed to soccer the opportunity to play? But then how do we, I was actually having a conversation this weekend. I was up in Washington for their annual general meeting, and this is something that their president was really passionate about. I was asking me, and I said, look, the truth of the matter is that the people that need after school programming are probably the ones that don't necessarily have the resources to pay for after school programming. So we have to find ways to support that so that we're letting those kids have a place that they feel safe, that they can have a social setting, that maybe they get food that they wouldn't normally get and everything like that. And so at our state level, we have a ton of states that are doing a lot of work to put more soccer in schools, after school programming. Alexandria, Virginia is doing a great amount of stuff. I know in Maryland, they have some really good programming happening there too. And so our role at USU Soccer is to support our states as they go into the local communities. But then also when there's communities that they can't get into, we have our own soccer in school program as well, that our director of grassroots, who now since moved on to US Soccer, but she was gone probably every other week, hitting up PE teachers, hitting up different schools, trying to get that out there. And so, I think that's a focus is, as the gentleman from Maryland will say, there's 60 million players and 60 million kids in the United States. We need to figure out how to get more of those kids to play soccer and to feel safe and to have opportunities.
So let me part B. The U.S. Youth Soccer, I'm assuming, is a non-for-profit. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. How do you balance? How do you balance kind of the give back? Because at the end of the day, to make institutional changes, whether it's physical activations, putting futsal courts in inner city communities, or things like that frankly take money. Because you've got player dues, you have fees, and a lot of that funnels up, and that's a big part of the revenue. It feels as if these needs are kind of, conflicting. They're conflicting with one another. We want to get more kids in. We want to try and reduce the cost, but in order to get more kids in, you need infrastructure, you need activations, you need things like that. So. Where does the CPA in you? Where does because you're looking at numbers. The spreadsheets are the spreadsheets. And as you change those factors, most of the time it's either you need to increase the prices or you need to increase the head count, and it's the whole chicken or the egg. How do you view that just simplistically as from a financial need? Where do you think the change is going to come from?
Yeah, one thing that, so along with me coming on and being the new chair in July, we actually just had a change of leadership at the CEO level about 4 months ago. And so one thing that me and the new CEO really are focused on is members first, and making sure that we are providing the most support to our members, which again are our state associations. Those are the boots on the ground, the people that are doing that. And so we, in partnership with US Soccer, really took a look at our books and said, hey, where are we focusing a lot of our attention? Where are we, to your point, looking at headcount that maybe doesn't need to have the attention that we need it to have? And where should we be focusing attention? And we've made some changes over the past couple months that have really focused on reallocating funds and headcount so that we are able to do that. So we brought on a new director of participant safety and member services that is working directly with our state associations to help them put, if they're running into issues, getting participant safeguarding and risk management at the forefront, and really being a resource for members. We brought on a new director of education, which his main thing is going to be to, provide coaching education and grassroots programming to state associations. And we brought on a new director of events that will be working directly with not only our national events, but state events and stuff. And so I think you're absolutely correct, right? We knew we had to take a really hard look at programming and what we were spending money on, and focusing on what we should spend money on. And so we've tried to do that over the past couple months. Now, obviously, it's only sustainable to what it is, and we definitely don't want to continue to raise prices, right? I think we took a first price increase about a year ago at one of our events. We're launching a new national championship series next year that kind of took into account some of that as well. Of, hey, going back to your pay to play stuff, we know how much money people are spending on soccer. Especially for us at our events, they're spending X amount to go to regionals, X amount to go to nationals. You're sitting here, and then you're $20,000 of a summer where I went to places that I probably wouldn't have chose to go for my summer vacation, right?
Right.
And so we looked at that and we said, okay, as an organization, we need to make sure that we're being mindful of the families as well. And so we've changed it to where you win state cup, you go straight to nationals. There's no regionals anymore. You're just going to nationals. We're eliminating that expense, not only from the family and the player, but from our books as well. It makes it a lot easier, right? But I do think, to your point, that it is necessary to always kind of do a gut check and hold ourselves accountable for where we're spending the money and what we're looking at. Another thing that we've done at the state or at the national level, so we look at our dues that we charge, and we've basically said, okay, here's the amount that we charge. What are our members? What are our state associations getting in response to that? And we've tried to take a look at that. And if the state says, hey, I want this, and we're saying, well, we provide this, why don't you like it? We're trying to have more open conversations to make sure that what we're providing them for the dues they're paying us is what they actually want. And we've found out that there is stuff that we've been providing that really hasn't been useful. And so we've tried to look a little bit at that and like sunsetting a couple things because it's not what our state associations need or want, and really being able to focus on what they need or want, because that's what's going to benefit the player at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a great transition, because one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we talked about was kind of player-parent expectations, their own view of ROI, right, for whatever they're putting into it. You know, and maybe I'm focusing for a second on those 400,000 and up, because in conjunction with that, I wanted to maybe integrate ODP, because there's, 15, 20, 25 years ago, ODP was significantly different than what it is today. And I think that, ODP is, everybody hears it, and it's Olympic Development Program. That's what the acronym is. And now the reality of ODP, as it relates to, quote, the one percenters that play in the Olympics, that do, move through the pro routes, the vast majority of them are not participating in ODP as it sits today. That's just kind of the reality of the landscape. So how do you view maybe the language as it pertains to the expectation of these kids, of these parents that maybe are, maybe they're a first generation soccer household. Some might be second just because somebody played in high school. But, I view a lot of the issues within U.S. youth soccer, not your organization, I'm just using it as, generic, in language and what is academy, what is select, et cetera. Just take a second and speak to, the words and how that affects what kids think they're getting into and what parents think they're paying for.
It is such a good question, JB, and I'm wondering if you've been in my meetings that we've been having over the past couple of weeks, because it's something that we bring up, right? Is what are the definitions of things? Look, I think the biggest thing right now is parent education is key, right? Again, we talk about the diamond, the pyramid that came out and stuff, and that's good, but again, it doesn't relate to where everybody is in every single place. But I think more things like that of parent education need to come out, and that's something that we've worked with U.S. Soccer on. Is, hey, what should we be telling parents, right? Obviously there's we want to make more money, so we want more people to come play for us type thing. But at the end of the day, it's also about your kid and what is best for them. And it's so funny because, growing up playing soccer, a lot of my friends now have kids that play soccer. My sister has a kid that plays soccer, and probably once every other week, once a month, I get a call that's like, hey, this is what's happening. What do you recommend? And my response is always, well, you got to think, do you want your player to be a 1 through 5, and like have that starting spot and have the space? Or do you want your player your kid to be a 15 to 20, right? Maybe they're sitting on the bench. Like, I don't know where your kid sits in the grand scheme of that, but that's something that you have to be honest with yourself about. Where is your kid in the development, and where is your kid when it comes to the leagues? Because at the end of the day, like, it's definitely important to challenge and everything like that. But I hate when I hear that players are leaving one team to go to another team, and then they're sitting the bench and not being able to do and play and stuff. And they had this idea that they wanted to go play college, but they're not going to do that and everything, and that does nothing for the game at the end of the day. And so I think that you're absolutely right that there's definitions that need to come out. There's some better structure that needs to come out. That's something that we actually met with US Soccer last week and are actively trying to do, is help us define where we are. Help us define what competitive means. Help us define what pre-professional means. Help us define what travel means. Because once we get to the point where we can define all of that, it's going to make things a lot clearer, so that, hey, I just want to have fun and I just want to go out there and play soccer. And like, yeah, I like to travel because that's cool to do. But like, I'm not looking to play soccer 3 days a week and then go here and do this, like it's a very different world. And you talked about real jobs and stuff like this. This is a volunteer job for me, right? I have about 10 other real jobs, but one of my other jobs that I do is I'm a high school coach. And when I coach high school, we're a private school here, and we have about probably 1 to 2 players on our team each year that actually are ECNL or something of that. And then everybody else is just out there to have fun, right? And it's like, right. We have to find out, like, who are the players that are just here for that? And they have a totally different expectation than the players that are here to actually like go to the next level and do stuff. And so definitions are really important. And I think that is something that US Soccer and hopefully USYS in partnership over the next couple months will have some ideas about where that looks.
Well, and I want to just take a second. You'll appreciate this because I too love numbers. I little econ in me. And I've known these numbers for a little while. I mean, the reality is, you look at the college landscape, there's approximately, somewhere between 12 and 14,000 roster spots just on the men's side, just on the boys' side, right? So if we apply that number to the 400,000 that are competitive within just your league, that's not counting MLS Next, et cetera, we're only talking about 3%. If 100% of those roster spots were populated by domestic players here out of U.S. Youth Soccer. Now, the reality is, for minimum 30, 40%, if not 50% of college spots are international players. You look at incoming freshman classes that are now at the D1 level, you're looking at 3 to 4 domestic per team. There's only 205 teams. The math just isn't there. And I only throw this out there because I feel like this is where parents get unjustifiably mad at the whole situation, because they are connecting this pseudo expectation where they're paying, in essence, college tuition money, over the span of 5, 7, 8, 10 years of youth club soccer towards what? And I'm a firm believer. Like, look, that's the issue. There is also these individuals who are not managing their own expectations. They're not being real with little Johnny, who is the 8th best player on the 7th best team in a particular club. Guess what? That pathway isn't there. So and this is a little bit of a soapbox, but it's the numbers part. I just wonder, like, how would it behoove the U.S. youth soccers and the U.S. club soccers of the world to be more vociferous, loud when it comes to, look, MLS Next and these leagues, like, we're no fools. We know what's going on. We know where all the college scouts are. Like, it almost like paint the picture of the pyramid with brighter colors.
Yeah,
green and red, because it's everybody's trying to kind of talk their way in a circle around value add.
Yep. Look, I think that is something that, first off, those numbers are crazy, right? I mean, 3% of all of our players maybe go play college soccer, right? And you take into account D2, D3, and AA, right? All that stuff, but it doesn't really change that much, right?
No.
But I do agree with you. I think that being able to say, hey, here's all the youth soccer players, right? Here's all the players. And I don't care what league you play on, what team you play on, anything like that. If you're good enough to go play pro, you're going to play at MLS Next. Like, that's that, right? You're going to go play at this level that that it has where those best players are. And then everybody down here, I mean, if you want to go play at D3 because that's where you want to go and you want to focus on this and you just want to play soccer, like, that's great. Here's a tournament for you. Here's a league for you. Here's somewhere that you can go play and hang out, and we will make sure that you get seen here. You want to go play D1? Great. Here you are. You want to try and I definitely think that being able to have a structure that is a little bit more clear is something that would be beneficial to the entire ecosystem. And I think there are a lot of leaders that believe that same thing.
Yeah, I feel like these conversations, specifically in the world that you are running in, the problem becomes anecdotal examples. That then the said club or team or coach or like, whenever you say, well, D1's really, really tough to impossible out of a small size high school. Well, inevitably there's one kid out of, some corner of Oklahoma that lands at Tulsa and they're like, he played college or high school soccer. And I just feel like, I'm waiting for the org. Maybe it's your guys' org to come out and say, look, here's the reality of the situation, and here's what we really want to do. We just want to make it fun, and we want to make sure that you as parents, you can't come to the table with a VW budget and expect to walk out of here with a Porsche, Yeah. And I feel for you. And you said something that for those of you that are listening, parents, I don't care where your kid's at. If your kid is good, if they are the top player on any given team, other coaches will notice, other clubs will notice. The system at the end of the day does find a way to elevate talent. I'm assuming, can you speak to that for a second, just through your own experience and kind of what you see, when kids stand out, how do you view that process?
Yeah, look, I definitely agree with that. I think that when a kid is good and they are at enough events and doing enough things that they're standing out. The system is in place to make sure that you're moving up, to make sure that you're being seen, to make sure that the opportunity is there. Let's take ODP, for example. You mentioned 15 years ago, ODP, we were the cream of the crop, right? We all know that. Take now, hey, there's talent ID, there's other stuff. But this, like over the last year, we had about 80 players that moved from ODP to pre-professional, national league, stuff like that. We have seen ourselves in a place where we have players that come into ODP and then they get picked up by MLS Next, and then they go off and play in MLS Next. Look, sometimes people get mad about that because they're like, hey, USYS as ODP, we're putting a lot into the program, and then we're losing these kids to MLS Next. But we don't see that as a negative. We see that as, hey, this is the way it should work. We have developed a player to be picked up for the potential to go professional. Would
it make more sense to put more hurdles, respectful hurdles within the process so that the feel and the vibe isn't, kind of eliminates, the pay to play or the politics of, a player within the organization? If there was a little bit more of a mandate in which, maybe club coaches have to nominate or, some kind of a, maybe, quote, open tryout, no fees, you come, but only those that perform before anybody cuts a check. Because that's where a lot of the angst and the anger starts to percolate is, again, unrealistic expectations via primarily parents. Look, kids know where they fall. You ask any kid on any team, who's the best on the team, the kids are going to name the best players, right? Yeah. Maybe a little bit more of a restriction or, like I said, hurdles that are more evaluative. Could you see that as a value to maybe eliminate the bad narrative?
Yeah, I think more than that comes into the lines of like standardization and hey, what does this mean, and kind of what are you trying to get to? So I mean, look, I don't think that it's a bad idea to say, hey, if this is where you're trying to go, let's take a look before you put it to write a check. I mean, for sure, right? You want to test drive the car before you go buy the car, right? You want to do the inspection of the house before you go put down the money. I don't think that's a bad idea, but I really think in order to change what we're doing now, look, first off is U.S. soccer has to be involved, right? It's you mentioned you want to see an organization come up and make a change. It's not going to be possible unless U.S. soccer is involved in those conversations and making those changes and stuff. And so I feel like right now we are at the point where U.S. soccer is taking those conversations serious and recognizes it. Look, again, after the 2-year ecosystem review, they have really recognized this is a system that we need to figure out how to change and get control of. But I think from there, you kind of have a blank slate, and you kind of we're trying to figure out what is the best way to do. And so no ideas are off the table for sure, which is awesome. But yeah. I think we're also, there is a sense of urgency to figure out what needs to happen, because look, it's when we talk about what our competition is, I like to not think that USYS's competition is US Club or MLS Next. Look, we don't want to lose our players to them for sure. That's not good for anyone's business. But I see our bigger competition as flag football, lacrosse, field hockey, right? Those are their sports that are coming in and taking away the athletes. Look, we could probably have another whole session where we're talking about one sport athletes and how we're doing a disservice to our kids and everything like that. And we don't have, multi-athletes and multi-sport athletes anymore. But that is something that we talk about a lot, is like, hey, we don't want to just keep fighting over our 5,000 players here or here. I want to go out and get to 5 million players ecosystem wide, 6 million players ecosystem wide. And the only way to really do that is to make it be easier to access, easier to play, more affordable to play, which right now we're not there.
Yeah. It's really funny too, because I talk about this often. If you look at telltale signs within any market, I don't care where you're at, right? And you roll up to a grade school as they're getting out, one of the most profound illustrations of what's going on in youth sports, or maybe youth sport interest is a better way to put it, is, here in St. Louis, you go back 25 years and 3 o'clock bell rings, kids are going to come out. You're going to have, 60% of the kids are wearing a Cardinals jersey, a few are going to be wearing a Rams jersey, and you just are not going to see a lot of soccer. Now, fast forward to 2025, you're looking at 90% of the kids are wearing some form of a soccer team's kit.
Messi, whatever, yeah.
Exactly. So, it's, and I've always said, one of the main drivers of the popularity of the game, when it comes to kids, the next gen, it's FIFA. It's EA Sports, period. It's gaming. That is a top 3 game every year over and over and over again. So whether a kid even knows who Pele is, they're playing FIFA, right? Yeah. So here's where I'm going with this. I don't see any barrier to entry to going from 2.5 to 5 million, et cetera, because you just, again, anecdotally, you look at what's going on the playgrounds and at the pool and everything else. Soccer is the most popular sport for all of these kids. So it comes down to, what do they know and what are they expecting to pay?
Look, to dive into that a little bit, to just kind of give my story of that. So my partner, she has a 7-year-old son, and he last summer decided he loved Messi, loved soccer. So, when I traveled, I'd start buying him soccer jerseys, but I'm like, he doesn't play soccer, right? He plays baseball, he plays basketball, he doesn't play soccer. So this year, she was like, I just don't know how to sign him up. I don't do I go to the Y? Do I go to this? I was like, no, we're gonna go through USU soccer, right? We're gonna go through our member organization. But the kid just he loves soccer, but she had no idea how to get him involved. And I think that's, again, going back to a couple of topics ago, parent education, letting people know how do you even play is such a big, important thing. And when you look across the country, every area has a different way that they do it. I can go to my local, youth soccer association and find out that way. I've come to find out that a lot of other places you have to find your club, then you sign up to your club and that way, right? It's different everywhere. And so that's when we talk about how do we make it be more accessible? Well, you kind of have to have the same rules for everybody across the board, right? Because it's very difficult to say, hey, this is how you sign up for soccer, where signing up from soccer changes from state to state. It's hard.
So let me, you mentioned it, coach parent education. You said parent education as far as process goes, but we alluded to coaching education as well, because you guys help, with a lot of those classes and continue in licensing, et cetera. I had notes down here. The other E word, coach parent etiquette. Where do you guys stand on trying to address and deal with just this explosion of, and I'll put it politely, dipshits that are making sidelines insufferable, to some degree, in some instances, even dangerous? All youth sports are getting out of control when it comes to parents that are bad eggs. What's your guys' plan or opinion or thoughts on nipping this in the bud, or what are you putting in place?
Yeah, I think you look at it two ways. So obviously you have a lot of the stuff that comes from there is referee abuse, right? And coaches and parents putting a lot of that towards the referees. And U.S. Soccer has done a great job. They just rolled out referee abuse prevention program in March, which is creating a process and putting, kind of, hey, if you're yelling at somebody, whether you're a parent, coach, player, whatever, this is what your kind of punishment is and consequences. So there's things like that in place. But from the general overall, like, hey, how do we get our parents to behave kindly on the sidelines? That's hard, JB, because you can't control the parents, right? And they're not anybody that we can really kick out of games or do anything like that. So you have to kind of rely on the referee to handle that. But one thing that we do is we partner with an organization that really handles parent education, parent etiquette, all of that stuff, and making sure that as many clubs and everything have that information. But I'll say, look, I'm also a parent, right? I coach my kids' U7 team. I watch them on the sideline as well. And as a parent going out to games, there's nobody's telling me, hey, don't say that, right? It's just one of those things that you kind of got the honor system. And so it's probably a horrible answer, but there's not a solution that we've identified to help get through some of that besides giving more empowerment to the referee to hold those people accountable.
Yeah, we often debate offline on this, and I'll just throw it out here online. Like if I were the power that be, zero strikes. Like, if you do it, because here's the way I look at it. I view U.S. youth soccer in general kind of on a bell curve, right? In which, we were alluding to the 1%ers earlier. These are the kids that are going to be moving up through leagues, through orgs, to the potential collegiate pathway, pro pathway, whatever. They're kind of over in this little bubble of 1% on this bell curve. And over on the other side of the bell curve, it shifts from players that are at the bottom to parents that are at the bottom. These are the ones that, if you've got a roster of 15, 16, 17, and you've got, 30, 35 other parents that are involved, if the bad apple, if there was zero, tolerance policy, if those bad apples were tossed out of the gate, the other 99% of families would probably value the leagues and the teams and the clubs a little bit. It's one of those things that would be kind of a mental experiment. Yeah, because it's about that culture. It's about the sideline, and you become represented by the other parents that are on the team. Now, I'm one of those dads that, like, I'm just bad around humans, so I'm down by the flag, and I don't yell at my kid. I don't do anything. Like, I don't. But the vast majority aren't, and of the vast majority, there's that smaller percentage that just really make it freaking miserable for everybody. Anyway, that's more of a statement, because, like, I would be pulling out the guillotine and be like, "You're gone, see ya." Yeah, and I feel really, really bad for the kids, but we all know what happens. We know as they get older, there's a correlation, Yeah. And anyway, now we're getting to child psychology segment of the show. So let me just kind of wrap this up a little bit because I know we're coming up on the hour. Next steps, USYS Soccer. What do you guys, maybe break us a little bit of a teaser? You're dropping the whole school year, birth year changes. That's a big one. That's a nuclear bomb in a lot of these families. What's the small arms news that's coming down the pipe?
Yeah, look, school year, birth year, that was huge for us. We are super excited that start the 25-26 season. So once we're done with our national championships here, we have, like I mentioned, our straight to nationals, President's Cup, which kind of sits in that more middle level. We're rolling that out into 8 sub-regions instead of 4 regionals, which hopefully cuts down travel costs and everything like that. Our National League, which is our highest league, we're also creating some different tournaments for there so that there's a carrot at the end of them. But I think, the biggest thing, JB, is over the next 6 to 9 to 12 months at USYS Soccer, we will be focusing on a lot of the things that we talked today about. What do our states need? How can we help our states more? And where does that fit into the whole ecosystem? We are doing an in-depth review alongside US Soccer to really understand how it's going to look. And so I would say that, stay tuned and let's see what happens in the next year. And let's see what really growth changes, organization changes happen, because I think that we all recognize that it's needed, and we're super excited to have the opportunity to do it, to grow the game and to better the game.
So I got a quick suggestion then. I've been living here in the Midwest. I'm going to suggest it to be named the I-70 Initiative. Okay. Put simply, right? We cut the nation in half. Forget about the Mason-Dixon line. We're going a little bit further north. These summertime tournaments, can we please find more facilities that are Minnesota, Wisconsin in July?
You don't want to be sweating.
June. Oh my God. Dallas is cool and all. It is what it is. But Toyota Park in early mid-June, not fun.
Growing up here, I actually was thinking that one time. I was like, how did I used to play in this? I obviously go out and watch all the tournaments, and I'm just like, how did I play in this? Like, I am miserable just sitting here watching it. So
yeah, in these days great. Too, with the turf, and if it's and frankly even newer turf, because you have more of the pellet. Yeah. Like you're 98 degree temperature and you're 125 on the turf. Yeah. Anyway, so that I-70 initiative, you guys can steal.
All right.
it.
Well, I'll write that down.
Do it. Well, hey, Tina, thank you so much for joining. We will definitely stay in touch because I'm sure there will be more news. You guys, breaking news, hit us up. Because here in St. Louis, we've got a few people that like the game. They all listen. So there's a lot of people walking around with USYS cards in their backpacks. So I really appreciate it. Best of luck moving forward. And for the rest of you listening, thank you so much for joining. Like, review, follow, share. Really easy and extremely cheap, to the point. It's free. Tina Rincon, Chairman of USYS. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys.